Wanted to welcome you to the 14th straight sold out Technori pitch. We've been doing these for over a year now. It's been really great. And for those of you who are the first timers, actually I'm curious, who here is a first timer? First time Technori pitch? Wow. Okay, so this has happened before, and it will continue to happen again. Please come out again. Tonight is a showcase of 5 to 6 local startups. Every company gets 5 minutes on stage. They've all gone through presentation training, so they know it is exactly 5 minutes. They will then get 3 minutes of Q&A, which is actually curated by you, the audience, through an app, which we'll get to in a moment here. But first, I wanted to thank JP Chase for giving us this theater for months and months and months now. They've been a wonderful sponsor of Technori, and honestly, we could not do it without them. Also, the internet tonight, as it has been since the first time we ever did it, is provided by Chicago Micro. They actually bring in a whole mobile hotspot that can support over 500 people at a time. It's actually a pretty amazing system. So please use them for your events if you ever need Wi-Fi. And tonight we actually have a presenting sponsor that I'm presenting right now. It's Sprint. Sprint stepped up to basically sponsor Technori Pitch, show that they care about what they're doing here in Chicago in particular. They're spending about $7 billion to build out their network as far as additional 3G and 4G LTE connections here in Chicago and all throughout the country. They've done a phenomenal job so far rolling it out, and it's actually pretty interesting what the plans are for the rest of the year. So it's definitely something to pay attention to. They're actually set up in the lobby if anyone has any questions about what they're doing and how they're supporting the technology community. Additional sponsors and supporters are all here. Everyone from 1871, Built in Chicago, the CEC have all been some of our biggest supporters, and honestly, we couldn't do it without them. I'm sure some people from these organizations here tonight, so thank you for coming and supporting. How to ask a question, so including Jason when he gets up here and everyone else who's on stage, all you have to do is go to ask.technori.com. It's powered by a system called conference.io, who are in the audience here as well. You can type in a question, submit it. It's anonymous. You just log in through the basic guest account. It's incredibly simple, fast. We love it. It allows every single person here to ask questions and be involved. And as soon as the night is over, we all head over to Rosebud Theater District. It's north of the building. Don't go to Rosebud Prime. We'll be there alone. So when you go up the escalators, you'll see Rosebud Prime. Do not go there. Go to Rosebud Theater, which is north of the building. Usually you get about 250 people. It's a really great time. It's a wonderful networking event, so I definitely encourage everyone to go. And as far as one additional little promo here, so found some pictures of fantastic ping pong tables. I like this one. It's actually got, I think it's supposed to be a koi pond right now. It's a lily pond in the middle of it. There's one that's actually a tube, but literally you cannot hit it out of the playing area. And also, apparently, you can convert every single door in your office into a ping pong table. The only issue is none of this really matters if your company culture sucks. So you can have the greatest stuff in the world, but if your company culture is awful, there's really no point in anyone working there, and they will leave you, and you can't hire anybody. So what we did is we created an event called Beyond the Ping Pong Table. It's coming up soon here in December. It's a company culture event. We've actually flown some people from around the country, some really phenomenal speakers. A company called Holsti is actually one of our favorites that's coming. And just tonight, we have a pitch code for everyone. It's a 25% discount code. It's called I Love Pitch. It only works until Friday, and then it expires. It gets you 25% off any of your tickets. All you have to do is go to beyond.technori.com, and you can register for the event. I really encourage everyone to come. It's fun. We're going to try to make it sort of an unconference. We're going to try to make it incredibly useful and lighter on the talking and a lot more on the interacting. And as far as tonight goes, if anyone who wants to interact with us, we usually get a ton of Twitter activity during the event, so please use the hashtag Twitter, Technori, and tweet our handle if you can. We appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to switch to this slide, and we're going to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. It's probably somebody most everyone in Chicago knows. So I mean, Jason Fried is an incredibly well-known dude. Has done a lot of incredibly cool stuff. I mean, you can introduce things if you want to, but basically 37 Signals, wrote an amazing book called Rework. Has spoken at TEDx Midwest here in town. Has had 5 million views? I don't even know how many views you have at this point. It's a lot. So very opinionated dude, great opinions, and we're really happy to have him here tonight. So I just want to welcome Jason Fried.
Thanks for having me, everybody. It's the end of the year, or pretty close to the end of the year, so I decided that I would share something with everybody that I learned this year that really changed the way I think about so many things around business. Pricing, competition, messaging, marketing, all these things are totally different in my mind because of this 4-minute video I want to share with you guys. The guy who's in this video is a guy named Clayton Christensen, who is an author, Harvard Business School professor too. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, is what he's famous for. He sort of coined the idea of disruption theory back in the 90s about how big companies get beat by little companies by going down market instead of trying to compete up market. And his newest thinking is this idea that people don't buy products to solve problems, but they hire products to do a job. Different language, similar ideas, but when you hear him talk about it, I think you'll think very differently about business from now on. So let's play this video, and then we can talk a little bit about it, and then Seth and I are going to sit down and talk. Because Seth was going to interview me backstage before, and I said, let's just do that on stage. So we're going to do a little interview on stage, and then we'll take some Q&A from the audience too. So here's Clayton Christensen, who's going to blow your mind, hopefully.
The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. And they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunky or chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? They didn't struggle to answer, so we then helped them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. They just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock, so they also wanted something that would just pop down there and stay for the morning. And the question, who will I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. You're gone in 3 minutes, you're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast, they crumb all over my clothes, they get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them, and then if the phone rings, we've got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up, that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customer's minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
So when I saw that video, like I still get the chills when I see this video because this guy is so deep. He's thinking about things completely differently than everyone else. Marketing's always been teaching us that we should create solutions. We're all solutions providers, and everyone has all these problems. But a lot of people don't have problems. They just need a job to be done. Just like they hire an employee to do a job at work, people hire products to do jobs for them as well. And another way to think about this is to think about this quote from one of his colleagues. I don't know the guy's name, but he's also a Harvard Business School professor. And he says that people don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. But the drill industry thinks that everybody wants a drill. But no one wants a drill. They want a hole. And so what else can make a hole? Well, if you're a drill maker, you only think that drills make holes. And so all your competitive energy is spent competing with other drill makers. But really, a lot of things can make a hole. You can just get a screwdriver. You can get a hammer and a pen and break through a wall. You can do a variety of things. You can get an auger. You can get a variety of different things. You can get these hand crank things. A lot of different things can give you a hole in the wall. And so you have to think about, when you think about marketing your product and selling your product, you can't think of it as solving a problem. You have to think of it as doing a job. And when you think about it as doing a job, you start to think about all the other possible things that can do that job. And all of a sudden you realize that your competitors are not who you think they are. They're not other software makers. They're not other tech app makers. They might be pen and paper. They might be pencil. They might be in-person meetings. These are our competitors. Basecamp, our project management tool, doesn't compete against other project management tools. It competes against email and pencils and phone calls and in-person meetings. And when you start to think about competition in a much broader sense by thinking about the job that your product actually does, you have much deeper insight into what customers really want and how you can sell them your products. So this is really interesting stuff. There's actually a book coming out next year about this idea of jobs to be done. And I'm not sure when it will be out, but I would highly recommend people do check it out when it is out because I think this stuff is really interesting thinking. And we've been actually interviewing some customers of ours trying to find out why people hire Basecamp. And it turns out people don't hire Basecamp for the reasons we think they hire Basecamp. We've always pitched Basecamp as a project management tool. But people actually hire Basecamp to cover their ass. That's why people hire Basecamp. They want full accountability. They want to know who said what when. They want to be able to point at a date and time and say, we delivered this file to our client. That's not project management. That's ass covering. And now that we know this, it's interesting. We interviewed a bunch of customers, and they all told us similar stories about covering their ass. And like next year, we're going to start changing our marketing. It's not going to be so much about project management. It's going to be more about covering your ass in a more polite way. But we would never have gotten to that if we didn't understand the job that Basecamp does, and not just think about the features that it has. So I want to leave you with that as an idea that you guys should keep in mind. Keep asking yourself, why do people hire our product? That is your products or the products that you might be building. So Seth and I were going to chat a little bit on stage. Then we're going to do some questions, I guess. Is that right? And we can talk about this stuff. We'll do some questions about some of this stuff. Or I'm happy to address anything, talk about anything 37 Signals related, or business, or marketing, or sales, or hiring, or anything that I have some experience with.
All right. Yeah, we were going to do
You
this.
should really be clapping for Clayton Christensen, because that's his video. But it's a fantastic thing, and I'm glad. Like, I learned about this stuff this year, and it really, truly blew my mind, and I hope that it influences you guys over the next year.
Thank you. We were going to do this backstage, and then every time I asked him a question, he was just like, well, why don't we do this in front of the audience? So I've always had a lot of intense questions to ask you over the years because I never had a chance to actually ask you face-to-face. What better time to do that in front of 550 people? So always curious, can everything actually be bootstrapped?
Can everything be bootstrapped? No, probably not everything, but almost everything.
Almost everything. So you've always been a very hard liner as far as everything can be bootstrapped. And
Yeah,
reading, writing books.
whenever I say everything, or anyone says everything, you should never believe them, because there's no such thing as everything. But there is such thing as almost everything. And almost every business in the world is bootstrapped. There are a tiny sliver that actually raise outside money. And so the norm actually is bootstrapping, but in our industry, it's not pitched that way. In our industry, there's a lot of talk about venture capital, raising money, and rounds and whatnot, but that's not the reality for almost every other business in the world.
Okay. As far as an interesting topic we brought up backstage was kind of the ethical gray areas that you tend to find yourself in. As a young entrepreneur, as somebody who is launching and you have practically no resources whatsoever, and you're suddenly, you find yourself having to create a business and hire people and support salaries and all that. You do things that tend to like blur the lines of what
You're saying I do things?
No, not you. The you that's out there, the you. A fun example I always like is that the Reddit founders, they were always, up until last year finally, they were always just saying, oh, we just built a product people loved. And they jumped on the site and they used it, and that's why everyone started using it right away, and that's why it filled up with content. And then finally in an article last year, they're like, oh, and by the way, we created hundreds of fake accounts and posted thousands and thousands of articles through those fake accounts to make it look like people were actually using the site until they actually started to use the site. So it's always one of those fun things where it's like everyone on a microphone is like, perfect, 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 and then like a couple beers and a booth, they're like, ah!
Yeah. I think there's probably almost always a story like that. It's every business is founding at some point. And part of it, I respect the hustle. Like, I respect the feeling that people like have to do whatever it takes to get something off the ground. The danger with that is that, and this is true in life and in work, the habits you form are really hard to break. The things you do over and over, the things that you think lead to your success, you're going to want to keep doing those things. And so if you don't have a strong sense of your own beliefs and your own values, and you start out doing unethical stuff to get business going, you're not going to know when to stop. And that's a really dangerous thing. So I think if you find yourself in a situation where you're starting something new and you see an opportunity to do something maybe a bit untoward because you feel like it might increase sales or get the word out, you really have to know that you're doing that. You have to know that it's wrong, or you have to know that what the risks are, what the impacts are. And if you don't know, then you're probably in for a really bad ride down the road. You're not going to know when to stop, and that's dangerous. So I think if you can, I mean, like for example, we were talking a little bit backstage that I tell people not to do spec work. Like if you're a web designer or a writer, don't do work for free. I did work for free when I first started, and I wouldn't do it now. But I feel a little bit disingenuous telling people not to do it when they're starting because I did it when I started. So I think there's a little bit of that in everyone's business story. But you just have to know what your values are and where you can draw the line and when you can draw the line.
Backstage, you're also talking about the concept of switch. People don't make impulse buys. Everyone is always switching from something to your product.
This is the other thing I learned this year, aside from this whole jobs to be done concept, which is this idea that people don't just buy a product. People don't wake up one day and decide to buy your product. They are actually switching from something else. They already use it. They already use something else. Something else replaces this need for them. And the reason why this is important is because buying sounds like a one-time event. It's just this point in time when someone buys something. But if you really dig into people and talk to them deeply about why they purchased something, you'll often hear stories that go back years. We just interviewed some people a few weeks ago, actually, around this topic. And this one guy bought a new mattress. It turned out that he'd been struggling with his existing mattress for 4 years before he actually decided to buy this mattress. Now, we saw this new mattress at Costco in the checkout lane. And you'd think that that'd be an impulse buy because he's like, in the checkout lane, there's like these foam mattresses that are packaged into a small box. But he'd actually been struggling for 4 years before he actually finally bought that mattress. So that mattress was not an impulse buy. It was a 4-year emotional process of researching mattresses, of living with bad backs, of having to deal with the struggle of like, God, how do I get this thing home, and how do I sell this, and all these things. So when someone buys something that you're selling, you have to understand that there's a ton of emotion tied up with whatever it was that they were using before. And when you realize that, you realize that your product has to be so exceptionally good that people are willing to put aside the baggage and the status quo and their habits of the past to switch over to something brand new. So that should really force you into being clear and making sure your product's really damn good and really worth the switch.
So speaking of products being really good, and I guess the topic you've talked about a lot is saying no to customers. And I don't know if you saw this or not. Robbie's probably very excited here for a second. Our CTO built a tool. Did you see this yet?
I don't know, what's it called?
No, he built a tool, he posted it today, that actually tracks live on your Twitter feed how many times you're saying no.
I did see that.
Okay. The current stat is 416 support requests, 267 no's.
Right.
As far as no, we will not build that, no, we're not going to do that, no, that's not what we do.
So what's funny is our data guy, we have like a data guy on staff, and he saw that, and he laughed at it, because he's like, that's so not scientific, and all this crap. We do say no a lot, but a lot of those tweets were like, no, but, or no, because, or whatever. So I think if you're going to say no, you have to explain your reasons why. But the real thing about no is that, to me, saying no is really valuable because it's saying no to one thing. When you say yes, you're actually saying no to dozens of other things. But it's couched in this term yes. So when you say yes, that means you can't do something else. And many times it means you can't do a bunch of other things. So I'd much rather be selective about the no's than say yes and quietly say no to a bunch of other things because of the opportunity cost. So I think that you're just being honest with your customers if you tell them we're not going to do this, or we don't think this is right for the product, or we can't do this, or we might do this later. But I don't think that it's fair to people to say, yeah, we might do that down the road if you're really not going to. And this comes back to your value system and understanding what your product's all about, who it's for, and what you believe in, what the vision is for the product. And if you're just saying no or saying yes to everything and to everyone, you're going to lose control of your product very quickly. Once it gets too big, you're screwed. You can't pull it back, and then you're not doing what you love anymore, and that's just not worth it.
All right, that's actually all the questions I have. Now we're going to open it up to you guys, but
Okay.
just wanted to, so far so good. Now you can pass you the water, man.
Just to walk around.
And,
I can't sit down and talk. I need to move.
all right, you can
Yeah,
roam
I'm
around.
gonna move.
So,